The Battle of the Little Bighorn is one of the most iconic moments in American history. But beneath the surface of this well-known event lie hidden stories, forgotten figures, and surprising connections. From the last surviving Lakota warrior to the unlikely ties between art, advertising, and scandal, this narrative goes beyond the battlefield to explore the complexities behind the legend. In this five-part exploration, we unveil the lesser-known facts that bring new depth to Custer's last stand. With first-hand accounts, petitions for justice, political intrigues, and a painting that became a nationwide advertisement, these stories reveal a multifaceted history filled with ambition, conflict, and legacy. Stay with us as we unfold the layers of a story that shaped America's past and continues to resonate today. Number 1, Iron Hale, a member of the Lakota Sioux, occupies a unique place in history as the last known veteran of the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Born in the mid-1850s, his life spanned nearly a century, during which he witnessed pivotal moments in both Native American and American history. When Hale died in 1955 at the age of 96, he marked the end of a living connection to one of the most famous battles between the U.S. Army and Native American forces. Though his early life was typical of many young Lakota men, he would later be remembered as a significant figure by historians, primarily due to his participation in the events of June 25, 1876. At the time of the battle, Iron Hale was a teenager, roughly 17 or 18 years old. Like many young men in his tribe, he was drawn into the conflict as tensions between Native American nations and the U.S. government escalated. This particular confrontation, known to many as Custer's Last Stand, took place along the Little Bighorn River in Montana Territory. The battle was part of a broader struggle as various Native American nations, including the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho, resisted the U.S. government's efforts to confine them to reservations and take control of their traditional lands. It was a defining moment in the Great Sioux War of 1876. The Battle of the Little Bighorn, though brief, was intense and bloody. Iron Hale, along with thousands of other Native American warriors, faced off against Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer and the 7th Cavalry of the U.S. Army. Despite being outnumbered, the Native American forces, led by figures such as Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, successfully overwhelmed and destroyed much of Custer's force. The Lakota and Cheyenne warriors, including Hale, fought fiercely to defend their land and way of life. The battle resulted in a complete defeat for Custer's forces, with all of the soldiers under his direct command killed. Hale's presence at the battle, as one of many young Sioux fighters, was a common one, but his survival and longevity would later make him a historical figure. After the battle, Hale and many of his fellow Lakota Sioux followed their leader, Sitting Bull, into Canada. Sitting Bull's decision to cross the border was strategic, as he sought to avoid further conflict with the U.S. military, which was determined to subjugate the Sioux and other Native American groups. The journey to Canada was difficult, marked by hardship and uncertainty. Many of the Sioux who fled with Sitting Bull were struggling to survive in an unfamiliar and often inhospitable environment. Resources were scarce, and the cold northern climate added to their challenges. Despite these difficulties, Hale remained loyal to Sitting Bull and his people. Eventually, however, Hale and others returned to the United States, specifically to South Dakota. Life for Native Americans who returned to U.S. territory was far from easy. The U.S. government continued its efforts to control native lands and restrict their movements, forcing them onto reservations where they faced poverty, disease, and a lack of autonomy. For Iron Hale, this return marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one defined by both physical and emotional wounds. In 1890, Hale was present at the Wounded Knee Massacre, another tragic and violent event in the history of Native American-U.S. relations. The massacre occurred on December 29, 1890, when U.S. Army soldiers opened fire on a group of Lakota men, women, and children who had been participating in a religious movement known as the Ghost Dance. The Ghost Dance, which spread among many Native American groups, was a spiritual practice that aimed to bring about the return of the buffalo and the restoration of native lands and culture. However, the U.S. government saw the movement as a threat, fearing it would lead to renewed resistance. When the military attempted to disarm the Lakota at Wounded Knee, violence erupted. Iron Hale was among those caught in the massacre. He was shot 3 times, twice in the back. Although he survived his injuries, many of his fellow Lakota did not. The massacre resulted in the deaths of an estimated 150 to 300 Native Americans, most of them unarmed, and remains one of the darkest episodes in the history of U.S. Native American relations. Hale's survival of both the Battle of the Little Bighorn and the Wounded Knee Massacre is a testament to his resilience, but his personal losses were staggering. Hale's life was marked by deep personal tragedy, especially during the tumultuous period surrounding the Wounded Knee Massacre. His family suffered greatly. His mother, father, wife, and infant child were all killed during this time, leaving Hale with immense grief. The exact circumstances of their deaths are not detailed in historical records, but it is clear that Hale's losses were profound. For many Native Americans, the late 19th century was a period of near constant loss of land, of culture, of loved ones. Iron Hale's story is emblematic of the broader struggles faced by Native American communities during this era. Despite the hardships he endured, Hale's life took a significant turn when he converted to Christianity. After his conversion, he changed his name to Dewey Beard, a name by which he would be known for the rest of his life. The decision to adopt a new name following his conversion reflects a common practice among Native Americans during this period, as they navigated the pressures to assimilate into Euro-American culture. Christianity was often introduced to Native Americans as part of broader efforts by the U.S. government and religious organizations to civilize Native peoples. For Hale, this conversion and name change marked a new identity, one that reflected both his native roots and his adaptation to the new world imposed upon him. Hale's later years were spent on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, where he lived out the remainder of his life. His life on the reservation, like that of many Native Americans, was characterized by poverty and marginalization. The reservation system, which confined Native Americans to limited areas of land, deprived them of their traditional ways of life, and left them dependent on the U.S. government for food, supplies, and protection. For Hale, living on the reservation was a far cry from the freedom and autonomy that his people had once known. However, despite these challenges, Hale continued to be a respected figure among his people. He was one of the few remaining links to the era of the Indian Wars and the battles that had defined the struggle between Native Americans and the U.S. government. His story, which spanned nearly a century, was one of survival in the face of overwhelming odds. Although he had witnessed and experienced some of the most violent and tragic episodes in Native American history, he lived long enough to see a new era begin, one in which the memory of those events became a central part of both Native and American identity. In the years following his death, Iron Hale, or Dewey Beard as he was later known, has come to symbolize the endurance of Native American culture and the resilience of the human spirit. His story is a reminder of the complexities of Native American history, a history that is often characterized by suffering, but also by survival. Hale's life, from the battlefields of Little Bighorn to the reservations of South Dakota, reflects the broader narrative of Native American resistance, adaptation, and survival in the face of enormous challenges. As the last known veteran of the Battle of the Little Bighorn, Iron Hale's legacy is one of remembrance. His experiences at Little Bighorn and Wounded Knee connect him to two of the most significant events in Native American history, and his survival of both battles speaks to his strength and resilience. Today, his story is an important part of the history of the Lakota Sioux and the broader Native American experience during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. While Iron Hale's life reflected the enduring impact of the Battle of the Little Bighorn, the broader story of the battle continued to intrigue Americans. Capturing this historical moment became a mission for artist Edgar S. Paxson. After years of research and dedication, Paxson would create the most accurate visual representation of Custer's last stand, offering a powerful depiction of the battle's chaos and significance. But how did this painting stand up to history? Number 2, in the history of American art, Edgar S. Paxson's work stands out as a monumental representation of one of the most iconic and controversial events in the United States Western expansion, Custer's last stand at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Born in 1852, Paxson arrived in Montana in 1877 at the age of 25, a year after the infamous battle took place. His interest in the event would span decades, ultimately resulting in what many historians and art critics regard as the most accurate pictorial representation of the battle. Paxson's journey to creating this painting was anything but brief. Spurred by his deep fascination with the West and its pivotal historical moments, Paxson dedicated over 20 years to researching the Battle of the Little Bighorn before ever touching his brush to canvas. His commitment to capturing the scene as accurately as possible was evident in the lengths he went to in gathering information. He meticulously interviewed nearly 100 men who had either fought in or witnessed the battle, representing both sides of the conflict. Among those he interviewed was the prominent Sioux chief Gall, who had been a key figure in the Native American forces during the battle. Gall's insights, along with those of other Native American warriors and U.S. soldiers, were crucial in Paxson's effort to create a balanced and historically accurate representation of the event. He was determined to avoid the romanticized depictions of the West that had become popular in the 19th century, choosing instead to focus on the gritty reality of warfare and the complex dynamics between the U.S. military and Native American nations. This commitment to accuracy set Paxson apart from many other artists of his time, whose work often reflected more myth than reality. In his quest for authenticity, Paxson took extensive notes during his interviews, documenting everything from the attire worn by soldiers and native warriors to the types of weapons used and the terrain of the battlefield. He created detailed journals outlining the precise physical locations of key figures during the battle, attempting to map out where each individual stood or fell. Paxson's attention to detail extended to the smallest elements, such as the colors of the uniforms and the markings on the horses. He was particularly interested in the emotional and physical states of the participants, striving to convey not just the historical facts, but also the atmosphere of the battle itself, its chaos, its violence, and its profound impact on those who experienced it. It took Paxson 8 years to complete the actual painting. The result was a 6 by 9 foot canvas, massive in scale and rich in detail. His painting, simply titled Custer's Last Stand, offers a sweeping view of the battlefield, capturing the intense action and desperate struggle of the moment. At the center of the painting is Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer himself, depicted in his final moments, surrounded by his men as they face the overwhelming forces of the Lakota Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors. Paxson's rendering of Custer is not idealized. Instead, it portrays the officer as a determined but ultimately doomed figure, engaged in a fight that he and his men could not hope to win. The painting also features a large number of Native American warriors, depicted with the same attention to detail as the soldiers. Paxson's portrayal of the Native Americans is neither villainous nor heroic. Rather, they are shown as skilled fighters defending their land and way of life. This balanced representation is another reason why Paxson's work is considered one of the most accurate depictions of the battle. He avoids the simplistic narratives of good versus evil that often characterized other works on the subject. Upon the painting's completion, Custer's Last Stand was met with widespread acclaim. It was seen as a significant artistic achievement, not only because of its size and technical skill, but also because of its historical importance. The painting went on a national tour, giving Americans across the country the opportunity to see Paxson's interpretation of the battle. The admission price to view the painting was 25 cents, a modest sum that allowed many to witness what was, at the time, considered one of the most important historical artworks in the nation. For many viewers, the painting offered a rare glimpse into the reality of the frontier wars between the U.S. military and Native American nations. At a time when many Americans still harbored romanticized visions of the West, fueled by dime novels, Wild West shows, and other forms of popular entertainment, Paxson's painting served as a reminder of the harsh realities of the U.S. government's westward expansion and its devastating effects on Native American populations. Over time, Custer's Last Stand became an iconic piece of American art. The painting's detailed, realistic portrayal of the battle continues to be a valuable resource for historians and scholars studying the event. While other artists have created their own versions of the battle, Paxson's work is still regarded as one of the most historically accurate depictions, due in large part to his extensive research and his willingness to present both sides of the conflict in a fair and nuanced manner. Today, Paxson's painting resides at the Buffalo Bill Center of the West in Cody, Wyoming, where it continues to attract visitors interested in both the history of the American West and the art that has helped shape popular understandings of that history. The Buffalo Bill Center houses one of the largest collections of Western art in the United States, and Paxson's Custer's Last Stand is one of its most prized pieces. The painting's location in the Buffalo Bill Center is fitting, as William F. Buffalo Bill Cody was himself a prominent figure in the history of the West, known for his Wild West shows that, while often sensationalized, also helped bring attention to the history and culture of Native American nations. Paxson's legacy as an artist is closely tied to this painting, but his broader contributions to American art should not be overlooked. Throughout his career, Paxson created numerous other works that focused on the history and culture of the West, including portraits of Native American leaders and depictions of everyday life on the frontier. However, it is his Custer's Last Stand that remains his most famous and enduring work. In many ways, Paxson's painting of Custer's Last Stand reflects the broader tensions in American society during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. As the U.S. expanded westward, it encountered fierce resistance from Native American nations who fought to preserve their lands, cultures, and ways of life. The Battle of the Little Bighorn was one of the most significant and symbolic moments in this struggle, representing both the military power of Native American nations and the relentless push of the U.S. government to conquer the West. By focusing on this battle, Paxson tapped into the complex emotions that Americans felt about their country's history. For some, the battle represented the bravery and heroism of Custer and his men who fought to the death in the face of overwhelming odds. For others, it symbolized the unjust treatment of Native American nations who were systematically displaced from their lands and subjected to violence and oppression by the U.S. military and government. Paxson's painting, with its balanced portrayal of both sides, allows for both interpretations, reflecting the ambiguity and complexity of the historical moment. In conclusion, Edgar S. Paxson's Custer's Last Stand remains a powerful and important work of art, not only because of its technical skill and historical accuracy, but also because of the way it captures the larger story of the American West. Through his meticulous research, attention to detail, and commitment to portraying both sides of the conflict, Paxson created a work that continues to resonate with viewers today. Whether seen as a tribute to Custer's men, a reflection of Native American resistance, or simply as a detailed depiction of a significant historical event, the painting remains a lasting testament to the power of art to shape and inform our understanding of history. Number 3. After the devastating events of the Battle of the Little Bighorn, the survivors of the 7th Cavalry faced not only the immediate emotional and physical toll of the battle, but also the question of leadership within their regiment. The loss of Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, along with many of the regiment's commissioned officers, left a leadership vacuum. In the face of this tragedy, a group of enlisted men from the 7th Cavalry took a rare and bold step, drafting a petition to the President and Congress of the United States. Dated July 4, 1876, just a few days after the battle, this petition was both a plea for recognition and a call for a deviation from established military promotion rules. At the heart of this petition was a request that Major Marcus A. Reno be promoted to lieutenant colonel to replace the fallen Custer, and that Captain Frederick W. Benteen be elevated to major, filling the vacancy created by Reno's promotion. The enlisted men of the 7th Cavalry believed that these promotions were not only deserved, but essential to maintaining the cohesion and morale of the regiment, particularly after the traumatic events of June 25 to 26, 1876. The petition is notable not only for its content, but also for its tone. The men who signed it expressed a deep sense of loyalty and admiration for their fallen leaders, referring to Custer and the other officers who perished alongside him as brave, heroic, and now lamented. Yet, even as they mourned the loss of these men, they made it clear that the survival of those who remained was due in large part to the actions of Major Reno and Captain Benteen. In their view, these officers had shown exceptional bravery and leadership during the battle, and their decisions had saved the lives of every man who survived. The Battle of the Little Bighorn was, by any measure, one of the bloodiest engagements of the Indian Wars. It pitted the U.S. Army's 7th Cavalry, under the command of Custer, against a coalition of Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors, led by figures such as Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. Custer's decision to divide his forces and launch an attack on the Native American encampment resulted in the near-total annihilation of his battalion. Of the approximately 700 men who entered the battle, over 260 were killed, including Custer himself. For the survivors, the experience was one of overwhelming odds and desperate fighting. Major Reno, who had been ordered to attack one end of the encampment, quickly realized that his forces were outnumbered and vulnerable. He made the decision to pull his men back to a defensive position on the bluffs overlooking the Little Bighorn River, where they were later joined by Captain Benteen's battalion. For 2 days, these men held their position against repeated attacks by Native American forces, until they were eventually relieved by reinforcements. In the aftermath of the battle, there was considerable debate over the actions of Reno and Benteen. Some critics argued that Reno's decision to retreat had been cowardly and contributed to Custer's defeat. Others contended that Reno's actions had been necessary to preserve the lives of his men, and that his retreat had prevented an even greater disaster. Captain Benteen, for his part, was praised by many for his leadership during the battle, though some questioned why he had not moved more quickly to reinforce Custer's position. Against this backdrop, the petition from the enlisted men takes on added significance. In their view, Reno and Benteen were not only deserving of promotion, but were also responsible for saving the regiment from complete destruction. By asking for these men to be promoted over others who might have been eligible by seniority, the petitioners were calling for a break with military tradition in recognition of what they saw as exceptional service. The language of the petition is both respectful and urgent. The men begin by identifying themselves as survivors of the battle on the heights of Little Bighorn River, immediately grounding their request in the context of the recent engagement. They describe the battle as one of the most bloody on record, emphasizing the intensity of the fighting and the scale of the losses. This framing serves to highlight the gravity of the situation and the need for decisive action in the aftermath. In asking for Major Reno to be promoted to lieutenant colonel, the petitioners acknowledge that this would be a deviation from the established rule of promotion, which typically favored seniority. However, they argue that Reno's actions during the battle justify this exception. According to the petition, Reno's bravery, coolness, and decision were key factors in the survival of the men who signed the document. The use of the word coolness is particularly striking, as it suggests that Reno remained calm and composed under pressure, a trait that the petitioners clearly valued in a leader. The petition also reflects the deep sense of loyalty that the men felt toward their regiment. They described themselves as survivors who held with bitter tenacity against fearful odds to the last, indicating that they had fought to the best of their ability, despite the overwhelming forces arrayed against them. This sense of loyalty extends to their fallen comrades, whom they describe as having fell close by Custer on the bloody field, garring the savage demons to the last. While the language here is dramatic, it reflects the petitioner's view of the battle as a heroic, if tragic, struggle. Major Reno's legacy is a complex one, and his actions at the Battle of the Little Bighorn have been the subject of considerable debate among historians. In the immediate aftermath of the battle, Reno's decision to retreat to the bluffs was criticized by some, including the relatives of men who had died with Custer. They argued that Reno should have pressed forward and attempted to reinforce Custer's position, rather than pulling back to a more defensible location. In 1879, Reno faced a formal inquiry into his conduct during the battle. The inquiry, held in Chicago, was initiated at Reno's request as he sought to clear his name and defend his actions. Over the course of several weeks, testimony was heard from a number of individuals who had been present at the battle, including officers, enlisted men, and Native American witnesses. In the end, the inquiry found that Reno had acted appropriately under the circumstances, and that his decision to retreat had been a reasonable one, given the overwhelming odds he faced. Despite the findings of the inquiry, Reno's reputation remained tarnished in the eyes of some. His later career was marked by personal struggles, including allegations of drunkenness and misconduct. He eventually retired from the Army in 1880 and lived out the remainder of his life in relative obscurity. However, for the men who signed the petition in 1876, Reno was a hero, and they believed that his actions had saved their lives. While much of the focus of the petition is on Major Reno, Captain Benteen also plays a key role in the document. Benteen had been ordered by Custer to move his battalion in support of the other units, but he arrived too late to prevent the disaster that befell Custer's men. However, once he joined forces with Reno, Benteen's leadership proved critical in holding the defensive position on the bluffs. Benteen's actions during the battle earned him praise from many quarters. He was seen as a steady and reliable leader who, like Reno, remained calm under pressure. The petitioners specifically ask for Benteen to be promoted to major, a request that reflects their respect for his conduct during the battle. By promoting Benteen, they argued, the Army would be rewarding a man who had demonstrated both courage and competence in a crisis. In the years that followed, Benteen's legacy would be somewhat overshadowed by the controversy surrounding Reno and the persistent myths about Custer's last stand. However, for the men who fought alongside him, Benteen was a vital part of the regiment's survival at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. The petition from the enlisted men of the 7th Cavalry is a remarkable document, not only for what it reveals about the aftermath of the Battle of the Little Bighorn, but also for what it tells us about the values and priorities of the men who fought in the battle. Their request for the promotion of Major Reno and Captain Benteen reflects their belief that these men had earned their positions through bravery and leadership under extreme circumstances. While Reno's later career would be marred by personal and professional difficulties, the petition serves as a testament to the respect and admiration that many of his men felt for him in the immediate aftermath of the battle. Similarly, Benteen's role in holding the defensive position on the bluffs earned him the lasting loyalty of the men who survived the battle. Today, the petition stands as a reminder of the complexity of the Battle of the Little Bighorn and the lasting impact it had on those who survived. It also highlights the importance of leadership in times of crisis and the ways in which decisions made under pressure can shape both individual careers and collective memories. Number 4. The Battle of the Little Bighorn left an indelible mark on American history, and its legacy extended beyond military and cultural discussions into popular art and commercial interests. One of the most prominent examples of this intersection is the painting Custer's Last Fight, completed by the artist Castley Adams in 1884. While the artwork may have originally been a tribute to the fallen soldiers at the battle, it eventually became a symbol of American enterprise and advertising, thanks to its association with the Anheuser-Busch Brewing Company. Adams's painting depicted the final moments of Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer and his men during the infamous battle. The dramatic portrayal, typical of 19th century Western art, captured Custer at the center of the composition, surrounded by his soldiers and engaged in combat with Lakota Sioux and Cheyenne warriors. The painting, though not known for its historical accuracy, resonated with the public's romanticized view of the American West and the myth of Custer as a tragic hero. It was this dramatic appeal that initially attracted attention to the artwork. In the same year the painting was completed, it was sold to John Ferber, the owner of a saloon in St. Louis, Missouri. Like many Western-themed works of art, Custer's Last Fight quickly found a home in a drinking establishment, where it became a focal point for patrons who were eager to connect with the legend of Custer's last stand. The painting hung prominently in the saloon for several years, drawing the attention of visitors and locals alike. In 1892, the painting entered a new chapter of its existence, when the brewer Adolphus Busch acquired both the saloon and the painting. Busch, a businessman with a keen sense for marketing, recognized the potential of the artwork as a tool for promoting his brewing company, Anheuser-Busch. At a time when advertising was becoming an increasingly important aspect of business strategy, Busch saw an opportunity to use the painting's dramatic imagery to market his beer. Bush's first step in transforming Custer's last fight into a commercial tool was to commission the artist Otto F. Becker to produce lithographs based on the painting. Lithography, a printmaking process that allowed for the mass production of images, was an ideal medium for Bush's purposes. By turning the painting into a lithograph, Bush could distribute copies of the artwork far and wide, allowing it to reach audiences across the country. The first edition of lithographs appeared in 1896, with an initial run of 15,000 prints. These prints were distributed to saloons and bars throughout America, where they were prominently displayed as part of Anheuser-Busch's advertising campaign. The image of Custer's last fight, with its evocative depiction of heroism and tragedy, became closely associated with the Anheuser-Busch brand, reinforcing the company's identity as an integral part of American culture and history. Over the years, the lithographs proved to be enormously popular. By 1946, 18 editions had been produced, with over 1 million copies distributed across the country. The painting's association with Anheuser-Busch transformed it from a piece of art into a ubiquitous symbol of American commercialism. The artwork became so closely linked with the brewing company that many people began to assume that Custer's last fight had been created specifically for Anheuser-Busch, rather than being an independent work of art that had been repurposed for advertising. Unfortunately, the original painting did not survive into the modern era. On June 13, 1946, Custer's last fight was destroyed in a fire. The blaze that claimed the painting broke out in the very saloon where it had been hanging for decades, erasing the original artwork from history. What remained, however, was its legacy in the form of the countless lithographs that continued to circulate, ensuring that the image would not be forgotten. The destruction of the original painting did little to diminish its influence. By this time, the image had already become so widespread and recognizable that it lived on through its reproductions. In fact, the lithographs continued to be produced long after the original was lost, with Anheuser-Busch capitalizing on the enduring appeal of the imagery. The story of Custer's last fight and its relationship with Anheuser-Busch speaks to a broader trend in late 19th and early 20th century American culture, the commodification of Western art and imagery. During this period, the American public was increasingly fascinated with the mythology of the West. Tales of cowboys, Native American warriors, and frontier battles captivated the imaginations of people living in rapidly industrializing cities, where the open frontier seemed like a distant, romanticized past. Western art, particularly paintings that depicted famous battles or heroic figures, became a popular means of connecting people with this mythic past. Artists such as Adams, who created Custer's Last Fight, were part of a larger movement to capture the essence of the frontier and its role in shaping American identity. These works often blended historical events with artistic license, creating images that were as much about the myth of the West as they were about its reality. For businesses like Anheuser-Busch, these images provided a valuable opportunity to tap into the public's fascination with the West. By associating their products with the rugged, heroic figures of Western lore, companies could appeal to consumers' sense of nostalgia and patriotism. The success of Custer's Last Fight as an advertising tool is a testament to the power of these images and their ability to evoke strong emotional responses from viewers. Despite its popularity, Custer's Last Fight was not without its critics. Some historians and Native American advocates have pointed out that the painting, like many depictions of the Battle of the Little Bighorn, presents a one-sided view of the conflict. In the painting, Custer and his men are portrayed as noble heroes, while the Native American warriors are depicted as faceless adversaries. This oversimplification of the battle reinforces the idea of Custer as a martyr and obscures the complex motivations and experiences of the Native American forces who fought to defend their land and way of life. In recent years, scholars have increasingly focused on the ways in which Western art, including works like Custer's Last Fight, have contributed to the erasure of Native American perspectives from historical narratives. While the painting remains an important part of American visual culture, it also serves as a reminder of the ways in which art can shape and distort our understanding of history. The association of Custer's Last Fight with Anheuser-Busch further complicates its legacy. On the one hand, the painting's widespread distribution helped to keep the memory of the Battle of the Little Bighorn alive in the public consciousness. On the other hand, its use as a marketing tool for a brewing company raises questions about the commercialization of history and the ways in which historical events are repurposed for profit. Despite these criticisms, Custer's last fight remains a significant cultural artifact. It serves as an example of how art can be used not only to reflect historical events, but also to influence public perceptions of those events. The story of the painting's transformation from a work of art to an advertising tool is a fascinating one, illustrating the fluid relationship between art, commerce, and popular culture in America. As we move further from the time in which the painting was created, modern interpretations of Custer's last fight continue to evolve. Today, scholars and historians are more likely to critique the painting for its lack of historical accuracy and its problematic portrayal of Native Americans. However, the painting's commercial success and its role in shaping the popular understanding of the Battle of the Little Bighorn cannot be denied. In the end, Custer's last fight is a reminder of the ways in which art and history are intertwined, and how the stories we tell about the past are shaped by the cultural and commercial forces of the present. Through its association with Anheuser-Busch, the painting became more than just a depiction of a battle. It became a symbol of American enterprise, nostalgia, and the complex legacy of the West. Number 5, the legacy of George Armstrong Custer. A controversial figure in American history extends beyond his death at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. His memory, along with the stories of those who fought alongside him, continues to resonate, particularly through their final resting places. While Custer himself is buried at West Point, other key figures from the events surrounding his life and military career are interred at Arlington National Cemetery. Among them are Frederick Benteen, one of Custer's officers, and William W. Belknap, a former Secretary of War under President Ulysses S. Grant. The connections between these individuals reveal the complex political and military tensions of the time, highlighting the ways in which Custer's story was intertwined with broader national issues. Frederick Benteen, a captain under Custer during the Battle of the Little Bighorn, is buried at Arlington. His role in the battle has been the subject of intense scrutiny and debate, with some claiming that Benteen's actions, or lack thereof, sealed Custer's fate. On the day of the battle, Benteen had been ordered to move his battalion to reinforce Custer's position. However, Benteen did not arrive in time, and by the time he reached the battlefield, Custer and his men were dead. Critics have accused Benteen of abandoning Custer to certain death by not responding more quickly to his orders. Others, however, argue that Benteen acted prudently under difficult circumstances, and that his decision to hold back may have ultimately saved the lives of the men under his command. Benteen's legacy is thus closely tied to the controversy surrounding Custer's last stand. Some view him as a capable and cautious officer who did his best under extreme conditions. Others see him as a figure whose inaction contributed to the disaster. Regardless of one's perspective on Benteen's role in the battle, his burial at Arlington National Cemetery places him among the nation's military elite, a testament to his long service in the U.S. Army. Another figure connected to Custer's story who is buried at Arlington is William W. Belknap, a Civil War brigadier general who later served as Secretary of War under President Grant. Belknap's career, however, was marred by scandal. By 1875, he was embroiled in allegations of bribery and corruption. Specifically, Belknap was accused of accepting kickbacks from contractors who were awarded lucrative military supply contracts. The scandal eventually led to his impeachment by the House of Representatives and his trial in the Senate, making him one of the few high-ranking officials in U.S. history to be impeached. Custer's connection to this scandal arose when he was called to testify before Congress in the matter. Custer, never one to shy away from controversy, accused President Grant's brother and Secretary Belknap of corruption. These accusations did not sit well with President Grant, who, furious over Custer's testimony, stripped him of his command. This action had significant consequences for Custer's career and ultimately his life. Stripped of his position as the overall commander of the military column tasked with subduing the Sioux, Custer found himself under the command of Brigadier General Alfred Terry. In an attempt to regain his status and prove his military prowess, Custer launched the ill-fated attack that would result in his death at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Belknap's fall from grace was steep. Following his impeachment, he resigned from his position, though the Senate trial continued. He was ultimately acquitted, but his political career was effectively over. Like Benteen, Belknap's final resting place at Arlington National Cemetery reflects the complexity of his legacy. A figure who served his country in both military and political capacities, but whose reputation was tarnished by scandal. The events leading up to the Battle of the Little Bighorn highlight the intersection of personal ambition, political maneuvering, and military strategy. Custer, whose reputation as a bold and daring officer had been solidified during the Civil War, found his career in jeopardy as a result of his testimony against Belknap and his accusations of corruption within the Grant administration. Stripped of his command, Custer was determined to restore his reputation and demonstrate his military capabilities. This determination drove him to take increasingly risky actions, culminating in the disastrous attack on the Sioux and Cheyenne forces at the Little Bighorn. For Custer, the battle was not just another engagement in the Indian Wars. It was an opportunity to reclaim his place among the nation's military leaders. His decision to divide his forces and press forward, despite warnings about the size and strength of the Native American forces, reflected his belief in his own invincibility and his desire to secure a decisive victory. Yet in doing so, Custer underestimated the resolve and tactical skill of the Native American warriors who opposed him. The result was one of the most infamous defeats in U.S. military history, a defeat that not only ended Custer's life, but also cemented his place as a tragic and controversial figure in American history. The legacy of Custer and those connected to him, such as Benteen and Belknap, remains a subject of debate and fascination. Custer's life and death have been the subject of countless books, films, and works of art, each offering different interpretations of his character and actions. To some, he is a symbol of American courage and determination, a man who fought to the bitter end, even when the odds were against him. To others, he represents the arrogance and recklessness of U.S. expansionism, a man whose ambition led to his downfall and the unnecessary loss of life. Benteen, too, remains a figure of controversy. His actions at the Battle of the Little Bighorn continue to be scrutinized by historians and military experts. Was he a hero who saved the remnants of the 7th Cavalry from total annihilation, or did his delay in reinforcing Custer contribute to the latter's demise? The truth may lie somewhere in between, but what is certain is that Benteen's role in the battle cannot be separated from the larger narrative of Custer's last stand. Belknap's story, though less well known, also plays a significant role in understanding the political context of the time. The allegations of corruption that led to his impeachment reflect the broader challenges facing the U.S. government in the post-Civil War era. As the nation expanded westward and sought to solidify its control over newly acquired territories, the lines between military, political, and business interests often blurred. Belknap's involvement in these controversies underscores the difficulties of governing a rapidly growing nation and the temptations of power that accompanied it. The fact that both Benteen and Belknap are buried at Arlington National Cemetery speaks to their importance in American history. Despite the controversies that surrounded them, Arlington, established during the Civil War, has become the final resting place for many of the nation's military and political leaders. Its rows of white headstones serve as a reminder of the sacrifices made by those who have served the country, even as the stories of individuals like Benteen and Belknap remind us that history is rarely straightforward. For Custer, whose burial at West Point reflects his status as one of the most famous military figures in American history, the story does not end with his death. His legacy continues to be shaped by the debates over his actions and the interpretations of his life. As with many historical figures, Custer's place in history is a reflection of the times in which he lived and the values of those who remember him. His story is one of ambition, conflict, and tragedy, a story that continues to captivate historians, scholars, and the public alike. The legacy of George Armstrong Custer and the figures connected to him, Frederick Benteen and William W. Belknap, reveals the complexity of American history during the late 19th century. Custer's death at the Battle of the Little Bighorn marked the end of a career defined by ambition and controversy, while Benteen's role in the battle has been debated for over a century. Belknap's political scandal, meanwhile, highlights the challenges of governance in a rapidly expanding nation. As we look back on these figures, it is important to remember that history is not simply a collection of facts, but a tapestry of narratives, interpretations, and perspectives. The stories of Custer, Benteen, and Belknap offer valuable insights into the challenges and complexities of their time, challenges that continue to resonate in discussions about leadership, responsibility, and the costs of ambition. For those who want to explore more about the lives of these historical figures and other pivotal moments in American history, be sure to follow this channel. Our in-depth discussions and objective reporting will provide you with insights into how history continues to shape the world today. Don't miss out on our upcoming content. Join us as we uncover more fascinating stories from the past.